Emotions are very complex. Our language contains many words for the range of feelings we experience. And how do we make sense out of this chaotic jumble? If emotions were logical, they'd be thoughts. Nevertheless, I've been working on over the past couple years, and you've heard different versions of this before, a compass to try to navigate this sea of emotions. I've come to classify a certain group of emotions as sensual emotions. And sensual emotions have to do with how we react to perceived or anticipated changes in our lives. These emotions do not require thought. Freud referred to these as the id, following the pleasure principle. Modern science refers to this as the lizard brain. Joseph Tronkale wrote in Psychology Today, in 1954, the limbic cortex was described by neuroanatomists. Since that time, the limbic system of the brain has been implicated as the seat of emotion, addiction, mood, and lots of other mental and emotional processes. It is the part of the brain that is phylogenetic ally, very primitive. There's a phylogenetically very primitive. Many people call it the lizard brain, because the limbic system is all that a lizard really has for brain function. It is in charge of fight, flight, feeding, fear, freezing up, and fornication. This is the part of our brain that's primitive and instinctual. The responses are automatic, and we can't be held morally responsible for feeling them. They're natural reactions to pleasure and pain. They're biochemical expressions of gain or loss. Sometimes gain or loss is perceived, and sometimes it's anticipated. We feel sad when we perceive a loss or pain. We feel fear when loss or pain is anticipated. We feel glad when we realize gain, and we feel desire when we anticipate or seek pleasure. Moral emotions, especially, are connected to needs. And I learned this from taking training from Marshall Rosenberg, who outlines a 4-part process for nonviolent communication. It teaches us how to communicate and receive feelings in a non-judgmental way. Like, for example, you're riding in a car with a friend or a spouse who is speeding. And you might be tempted to say, "You maniac! Are you trying to get us killed?" Think of the response you might get. But if your partner is trained in nonviolent communication, they will use the 4-part process. First, they will observe. When I hear you call me maniac, and then they will attempt at step part 2, feeling identification. I wonder if you are feeling scared. And then they will do need identification. They'll try to connect that emotion with a need. Perhaps you have a need for safety. And then the fourth part is making the request. Is there a specific action I can take to reassure you? But we can't count on our partners and friends to be so well trained. And so it might be us to start the process with nonviolent communication. So when you drive 20 miles over the speed limit, I feel scared. I need safety. Could you slow down to 5 miles over the speed limit? Now, they still might perceive this as a threat, a critique. You have no control over how they will hear it. You might have to respond to how they respond again and again and again. And Marshall would encourage us to keep trying and hear the emotional content. They'll say, "What do you think, I can't drive?" When you say, "I don't think you can drive," perhaps you're feeling, "I doubt your skills." And then you just keep going until you get there. You have to accept people's feelings, because until you accept their feelings, you're never going to get to logic. Because logic never works with feelings. No matter how sensible it is to tell someone to calm down, it has never in the history of human beings ever worked. So this is why political discussions turn into shouting matches where no logic is permitted. People immediately become fascists or anarchists, Hitler or communists, within about 3 sentences of any political discussion. So perhaps when they're shouting, "You're an idiot," start with empathy. That often what we perceive as anger is a fight or flight response. And there are emotions that are underneath those responses, even those that seem to be couched in irrationality. To wonder what people are feeling before coming up with your counter argument might build some trust. And only after trust is established can any logic occur. Now, nonviolent communication deserves a sermon of its own, and I know at least one person in this congregation who would like to do ongoing practice groups, because it is a good practice and it needs practice, as it's so counterintuitive, because even though we think we're intellectuals, we still have lizard brains, and we operate out of our lizard brain so much. If anybody of us have watched politics in the last month and shouted at our TV, we are fully aware that our lizard brain is still there. So of these 4 emotions I'm going to talk about today, the needs that are connected to them is desire needs to be satisfied, fear needs salvation, sadness needs healing, and gladness needs to be shared. Imagine waking up a lizard. You need to get warm. You desire a sunny rock. You find one. You get warm. And then you realize you're hungry. You desire food. You find food and are satisfied. And then you are horny. Perhaps you are a horny toad. Or a Texas Christian horned lizard, horned frog. You find your partner and are satisfied. And then after all this activity, you are tired. You desire sleep, you sleep, satisfied. And this practice works well until hijacked by addiction. And addiction is when the seeking of satisfaction of one need overrides all the other. To survive, we must balance our needs. If our lizard becomes addicted to sunbathing, it will miss opportunities to eat or mate. And if it falls asleep, the hawk will swoop down and eat it. And so religions, realizing that even though we have these basic needs and desires, often seek to regulate them to try to stop the addictive process. There are rules about sexuality, there are rules about intoxicants, there are rules about what you can and cannot eat. And sometimes these rules and intoxicants and even sex are incorporated into religious rituals, festivals, feast days, and the honeymoon, and all sorts of other things that are part of the culture. Buddhism strikes directly at desire, stating that desire is the source of all suffering, and that even satisfaction of desire leads to suffering if we cling to it. Because desire presupposes separation. And separation is an illusion, is Maya. And through meditation, one becomes one with everything. Fear needs salvation. Now there's a nice religious word. Salvation. The primal fear is death. Now the lizard has a simple solution. Fight or flight. And it works until it doesn't. But the human brain has developed to a point where we wonder, what happens when it doesn't work? This is where religion and philosophy have tried to help us. Many humans conceive of an afterlife that is different from this one. Shinto and Native Americans imagine ancestors watching over them, and they, in turn, plan to watch over their descendants. Hindus and Buddhists believe in reincarnation. One keeps getting another chance to live until one no longer needs to be reborn and one merges with the great oneness. Islam and Christianity propose a heaven. And Judaism and humanism focus primarily on this life. In Jewish scripture, Sheol is the grave and we return to dust. And in humanism, one only lives on in the memory of others. And even though these are very different solutions, they all have a constant in the loss of oneself or ego. Because it seems the more we are concerned about saving our sense of self after we die, the more frightening it is. Christians give their lives to Jesus. Muslims submit their lives to Allah. Buddhists and Hindus fight the Maya and the illusion of the separate self. And honoring ancestors and doing good works are ways that Shinto and Native American and Jews and humanists offer oneself to the larger community. These are countered by the materialistic philosophy of American and worldwide consumerism. The one who dies with the most toys wins. Of course, there are many things in life itself to fear. Being social creatures, we all fear loneliness, loss of status, poverty, and pain and suffering and illness in all its forms. Which is why religion and philosophy seek ways to save us from these fears as well. If one fears poverty, there are several paths to salvation. One could take a vow of poverty. By choosing a simple life, one finds out how little one actually needs. One finds true freedom. In the words of Chris Christopherson, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And then there's the path of salvation of working hard and saving money. To do this, you must have faith that the system is not rigged against you. A third path to salvation is to rely on fate. Pray, play the lottery, be born to rich parents. And the fourth path, steal. Lizard brain strikes again. Paranoia is like addiction. It's when the sensual emotion of fear gets unbalanced. The lizard suns themselves on the rock and only fight or run from real threats. Humans, while sunbathing, can consider threats both real and imaginary, like skin cancer, or how much they'll be rejected by their friends if their tan isn't up to par. And all these threats that we can conjure up can derail the brain. If somebody gives you food, you might not be able to enjoy it because you think it's poison. If someone says hello, you go, I wonder what they meant by that. Every stimulus is translated into fear. That's paranoia. That's a sensual emotion out of balance. Pain and sadness need healing. When we are injured, our body loses some function for a while. Healing at a minimum is survival. At a maximum, it is a return to full function. A small cut to a hemophiliac can lead to death. The first step is to stop the bleeding. Sadness is emotional pain. Some solutions work better than others. A tourniquet is effective, but can result in a loss of a limb. A tourniquet around the neck is a suicidal solution for a bloody nose. Think about it. Sadness, uncontrolled, is depression. What might seem like just a paper cut, an emotional paper cut to someone who is depressed, can send them deeper and deeper, because all inputs are perceived as loss. One wakes up and grieves leaving the bed. The possibility of love only leads to the reality of loss. Antihedonia means that things that used to bring pleasure no longer work. This means the dopamine centers in the lizard brain are not functioning. A doctor's help is needed. But in the day-to-day pain and sadness that is just part of our existential existence of everyone, Buddhism suggests detachment from pleasure in order to avoid pain. And most religions come with a community that help us heal when there is pain. But a community can also be harmful if it does not allow sadness to be expressed. People can be strangled by the tourniquet of false happiness. Putting a bandage on a wound and never changing it only hides it and leads to infection. One's not required to be happy all the time. Healing sometimes leaves that scar, but it need not prevent one from feeling whole. Who we are is constantly changing. We are constantly losing aspects of ourselves. We need to recognize that loss, but not get stuck there. We must allow new things to reappear. When our garden dies each fall, we must be careful not to pave it over so that there's a chance that it will regrow in the spring. But we can't try to be happy all the time. In the fall, we shouldn't spray paint our grass green. That's crazy. It's mania. It's a plastic happiness. We have all met or been this person at times, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, unable to have a serious conversation without becoming silly, the stereotypical madman in a straitjacket laughing hysterically. Mania is often the mask that breaks down. Pagliacci is Italian for clowns, is the name of a famous opera. And it was brought to my attention as a child by Smokey Robinson saying, "Just like Pagliacci did, I try to keep my feelings hid. The tears of a clown when there's no one around." This isn't a place where we need to hide our tears with a false happiness. But it is a place where we can share our joys as well. And joy needs to be shared. When I was trying to think of what does one need, it's easy with the other emotions. When you desire something, well, you need to be satisfied. When you're scared, you need to be rescued. When you're sad, you need healing. When you're happy, everything's great. But I thought, then there is this human social need to share it. And I've told this joke so many times, and I've probably even told it from the pulpit, that's not going to stop me from telling it again. During the Christian season of Lent, people try to manage the emotion of desire by giving up one thing. And there was this southern preacher who gave up golf for Lent. And that was pretty easy in Ash Wednesday. It was February. It was possible to play golf, but not so much. But as Lent moved on and spring got nicer and nicer, the golf course became more and more tempting. And people were out on the golf course, and it was on its way to church and everything. And Holy Week was just torture. It was just the most gorgeous. It was like in the 70s, the oppressive summer heat hadn't happened. It was beautiful. His parishioners, who knew that he had made this vow for Lent to not play golf, would come up to him and tell him what a wonderful golf game they had, just to needle him. Saturday morning before Easter was perfect. And he snuck out to the golf course at sunrise. And he was all alone. And he played the best round of golf. There was no distraction, nobody talking to him. Just one with nature, one with the ball, one with the air. He even got a hole in one. An angel, observing this, asked God, shouldn't we be punishing him for breaking his vow? God said, I am punishing him. Who can he tell? Every pleasure is better when shared. Food, sex, conversation, sport, photography, art, music, ideas. This is why we gather to worship. We are sharing things of worth with each other. That's why we celebrate marriages, births, have potlucks, classes, and forums. This place is a sanctuary for sharing joy, a place to practice peace. But it is also a place where we welcome sadness, fear, and desire, because they too are part of our humanity. It's hard to make sense of emotions, but we can practice empathy. We can accept one another and encourage spiritual growth. May we bless and be blessed.